Julie here with Sirius Dallas Moon, and with Chiron going over my own Mercury, and Mercury with Mars. This is a good time to speak about the context of communication in cult-like settings, and with Venus Beta per se, we have a unique aspect to that because even when we are discerning about cult-like communication, um, when we're talking about beta per se cases, which means not being raped is a prerequisite to communication. The how should I say that? A person going through violation of sense of self, torture, harassment, targeting is not in a situation where their phrasing of their struggle can be criticized. This is also connecting to the video I did about Sun squaring Pluto as an ego death and not being able to keep the peace because um, everybody, if I take a look at with the case of Polycote, everybody were admiring the dignity, calmness, um, class in which Polycote was running herself in front of the media. What they are forgetting is that is that most others are dead. And between tombstone or dead alive person with various disabilities from trying to unalive themselves unsuccessfully and Polycote, there is a wide array of reactions, responses and reactions, particularly when we consider that the juristic system is built upside down from what it would take to grant the safety of people from rape, which is justice in that case. And so, underneath the communication, also when we talk about manifestation and occultism, not being raped is a prerequisite. Even if I think about me doing a channeling experiment, it wasn't that me doing a channeling experiment was bad or wrong, is that the prerequisite that I would not be raped and tortured or targeted and was basically not existing back then. And then for a decade attempts to avenge me trying to be, because being was something that people held vengeance towards being. Now, of course, when children go through ritual abuse, the trees become enemies. But then I say, okay, then euthanasia. For me, not even for others. And I actually applied for euthanasia. The only thing after such a thing, if people think about the fact that doing the same things, expecting different results is insanity. The only thing different would be a total global human extinction that is immediate and without suffering. Now, this is not an idea or an opinion, but it's a sense of self, not because the sense of self is identified with a value or an idea or a religion or an opinion or a virtue even, but because there is a reason why dissociative identity personality, which is susceptible to mind control, is created by rape and torture. And this is also what this Mercury Mars opening cycle uncovers. When we're talking about occultistic rape, the support system is taken away from the rape. This is also why when I talk about case where likely some of my colleagues, either products or businesses, were involved, and I mean involved the way we talk about neuroscience, because I was also tortured, and I don't know if somebody took on my energy while I was tortured and harmed others. And it's both about addressing that and taking into account that certain people could have been raped occultistically, so the system of support was taken from them. And so, while definitely um, Uranus ingress in Mercury sign and Mercury opening synodic cycle with Neptune, Saturn, and Mars are a great time to rethink our communicative behavior. It is also important because Aries is usually such such a go-getter and competes with itself, meaning if something is difficult, Aries will put the time and study that. Or if this is kind of like, hey, if there is a difficult in communication, we can study how to communicate. But first, we need to have the prerequisite that the person is not raped. I did a channeling experiment when I was tortured and raped at hospital, and um, what came out of it was, I'm not saying that I did not get profound things out of it, um, but it further emphasized how abolishing rape and torture is a prerequisite for assessing the scientific value of even um, what we see, and that includes the value of the nihilism, because unfortunately it is for the first time in my life I began to connect with something that is not nihilist, then I was ritually abused again. And I want to also emphasize that ritual abuse is an occult practice. So the people that are at the physical rituals and go to physical torture, that people that go through physical torture through occult, and the people that go through um, all kinds of targeting, and the people that are going through, um, how should I say that? Oh, but it's only a minor form of harassment. Well, the person still wakes up. They're not getting used to being slightly harassed, so that they'll get used to being even more harassed. Ether and the physical is not the real estate of the Epstein Maxwell ring either. Mercury opening the synodic cycle with Mars is definitely stressing authentic communication, but also fending for the people that can't communicate. And also awareness that sometimes a person can communicate in a vlog, but they can't communicate in a correspondence. And a prerequisite for listening and being able to process is that the content is not occultistically assaulting. And people that are susceptible, that were raped and that were assaulted, are having emotional overflow or psychic overflow that negates them being able to communicate in a receptive dialogue way. This is because when communication is used as assault violence to assert the um, imposed, how should I say that, opinion, to silence the rape. And that's not communication, and that's not something one can listen to without losing their sense of self. And so the Chiron in Mercury signs, um, while Mercury is approaching Chiron in Aries, are really associated with that. It's not just study how to communicate, it's just abolish rape as a prerequisite. And this is so pertaining to children because so many children are, even when they are seen as neurodivergent, they're like, oh, but you need to behave yourself. Oh, we just need to be more patient with their behavior until they. No, something is raping your infant, for Christ's sakes. And it happens right where you send that infant to rehabilitation. And the people that survived this by coming up with the social, psychological practices and opinions that would take your child to be raped. Whether they are conscious of this or not. When I was practicing Abraham Hicks, I saw, but Abraham Hicks doesn't cover rape. I addressed this and then I still try to practice Abraham Hicks regarding manifesting the sexuality that they do want. Now, because I know that Mercury is going to meet Aries and Chiron, and I have Chiron Rahu myself, so I can see the Chiron placement a little bit more than people that, let's say, have Chiron in Taurus or Chiron in Cancer. And I foresee what will happen if we just practice communication and forget. Then what is going to happen is that people are going to, and I know that because I did that. Remember when Rahu was in Gemini and everybody was yes ending the universe? Shout out, shout. Now, there's nothing wrong about that, but some of that was taken by people that wanted to psychologically get people used to saying yes to things that they wouldn't say yes to. I did not participate in that. I was more participating in um, finding what is a yes to me. And then there was an actual ritual abuse that was targeting the sense of embodiment. Then people are going to go through that and then reach Chiron. Mercury reaches Chiron and Aries. Now I'm saying the yes and is something that I studied when I was learning communication skills in academia, quite around the Me Too. So I was also susceptible to making that mistake. The feminists were like, oh, responsibility instead of shame. And I was trying to adopt, and I said, okay, what about creativity, curiosity? And then Mercury is going to reach Chiron, and people are going to deal with the fact that not being raped is a prerequisite to communication, particularly with Chiron Aries. And not being raped is a prerequisite to understanding one's sexual preferences and gender and sexual fantasies or sexuality. There's a reason why people practice embodiment in Taurus. And the fact that blaming someone, oh, they can't communicate well. First of all, usually it's done when they have perfectly communicated the violation that they went through. And even in the correct terms, like spiritual rape or soul rape, nothing more accurate than that, because it's an occultistic practice to try to trade souls of people. When the person never consented to that. And so people are being accused of not communicating well when they, now sometimes they're being accused of not communicating well because the people that went through that to understand what they are saying, they need to understand that they went through rape that was not a contract. And sometimes it's people that know perfectly well, but their entire hoax is working on that. And hey, that person just named that, and they're like, oh, maybe you should study how to communicate. You don't communicate it that well. Trying to harm the person with the words that they said when they perfectly communicated that there was a violation of their boundaries. So Mercury opening a cycle with Mars, and then it's going to move through Chiron and Aries, and then it's going to square Pluto. We're going to have polarizing messages around sense of embodiment. Also, we want to think about the visibility with Sun square Pluto. Particularly Leo placements. Let's say Leo Marses can, Mars is how we assert ourselves, or how we, let's say if we want to deliver a message, then, or Mercury Leos, they can use imagery to deliver a message, but they, if they take it to point of trying to, how should I say that, um, tarnish the way, the visibility or the character of someone who goes against rapey patterns, then Ketu is going through Magha Nakshatra and is coming to dematerialize that pattern. Here is why, while Mars in Leo is strong, it can be too hot for its own good, whereas Sun exalts in Aries. Mars in Leo is acting with the visible, is visible action, unless there is like a Pluto there. And Mars is ruling also over Scorpio. Scorpio is the realm of the invisible. Now, while Mars in Scorpio, not well aspected, could be acting in the realm of the invisible, Mars in Leo could be acting in the realm of the visible, not considering the realm of the invisible. Now, it can both thwart its effort and try to make and try to, and then that reaction can be trying to join a certain weird cult that will only backfire for this placements, or um, that they can act on the basis of what they can see, or they act motivated by what they see, or they can act to show. And while it may be very compatible with some other Marses, it creates a hard aspect with Taurus, Scorpio, and Aquarius aspects. With Aquarius aspect, that the opposition is very clear. The underdog doesn't have the privilege to act like, the king can humiliate, but the underdog cannot. It can only shout, "Hey, the king is naked and he's raping a minor." Mars Mars in Taurus is around the beta per se story. And it's like, well, it looks like that Mars has no self-respect, but because sense of self is a prerequisite. Oh, no, they were raped by the Leo Mars sometimes. Now, sometimes not, but if the Leo Mars doesn't identify, then they are being seen as the rapist now. Okay, but think about the Me Too. At first, it's like, no, who's going to believe us? And then it's like, the only people who are not going to believe us by now are the people that are doing that, are the people that are harassing, are the people that are targeting. Because the other ones were like, yeah, of course, I went through that too. The Scorpio Mars um, was acting in the invisible realm, and the Leo Mars can misinterpret its actions because it looks only at what it sees and not what the intention. Another thing to be cautious with the moon here, moon and ascendant. Moon and ascendant, the moon person can feel the ascendant person, but what they feel is the ascendant. Take into account that the raped person or targeted person is a dissociated person, and take into account that by the time that the person can speak, they have to have some sort of emotional capacity. And then they still have to address this issue. Actually, when it's not at its when it's at its worst, they can't speak. But if that's what they rely on, then no, that person will speak up. And of course, we have to take into consideration um, Mercuries that are not in good aspects with one another find it difficult to understand one another. You know what? I'd go even so far as saying that if somebody is thinking to have intimacy with person whose Mercury is not in harmonious aspect, they should be thinking more than twice. Now, because of the astral realm, a lot of people are like, how do I know this Mercury? It's also true between, let's say, therapists and patients. Aries always takes into consideration the most naive interpretation, which is why everything that is not naive 9/11s around the Aries placements.